As you may be aware, the general cost of living in Australia has risen over the past few years, and while inflation is currently at its lowest level since 2021, access to affordable housing, food, and essential services continues to be a significant concern for many Australians. So in this video, we're going to talk about the cost of living in Australia and key things you need to know if you're planning to move here. Disclaimer though, as we always say, your overall cost of living will vary according to different factors. For example, where you live in, your state, city, or even suburb, your overall lifestyle, and even your household size, whether you are a family, single, or a couple. And in line with all our other cost of living videos, we'll start off with the average salary in Australia to put all these costs into context. According to the latest ABS reports, the average weekly ordinary time earnings for full-time workers in Australia are around 1,900 Australian dollars per week. I know that this may sound very high, but remember that this is average weekly earnings, and median weekly earnings are almost 1,400 Australian dollars per week. Now, knowing all this, let's get started. When it comes to grocery shopping and buying food and your essential items, according to the latest reports, the average Australian household, which is comprised of 2 to 3 people, spends between 800 and 1,200 Australian dollars on grocery bills per month. And an interesting fact is that those living in New South Wales have the highest spending on groceries at 212 Australian dollars per week, whereas people in South Australia spend the least, with an average weekly grocery bill of 186 Australian dollars. In my case, I live with my partner. We're a 2-person household, and we spend around 700 to 800 per month on grocery bills. Now, if you're moving to Australia, something that I always recommend doing in order to estimate your grocery bill per month, especially if you're outside Australia, is to jump on the Coles or Woolworths websites. These are the major Australian supermarket chains, and you can create your own cart by selecting the items you usually buy. This way, you can have a better understanding of how much you will be spending. Now, if the case is that you're already here in Australia and you want to save on grocery bills, something that you can do, and again, this is obvious advice, you can cook at home, you can buy discounted products, go to farmers markets and buy in bulk, or go to discount supermarket chains like Aldi. And if you want more tips on how to live cheap in Australia, I have a full video about that. I'll leave you the link down below. Now, in terms of housing costs, and probably this is what most of you are interested in, according to the latest data, the median weekly rent for a house across Australian capital cities is around 650 Australian dollars, and the median rent for a unit in capital cities is 630. Now, when it comes to regional and more remote areas, the median rent for a house is around 550 per week, and for a unit, 480 per week. As we always say though, rental costs will vary according to where you live, including your state, suburb, and type of property. Remember that the closer you live to the city or the beach, the more expensive rent will be. And something else that you may want to know is that when you're looking for rental properties here in Australia, rent prices are given per week, but you may pay rent per fortnight or monthly. This will depend on your landlord or real estate agency. And another interesting fact is that Sydney today is the most expensive Australian city when it comes to rental costs, with the median rent being 750 Australian dollars per week, whereas Hobart in Tasmania is the least expensive capital city, with a median rent for a house sitting at 540 per week. Now, a low-cost housing option, if you're looking to save money on rent, is to live in shared accommodation. This means sharing a house with other people, and an amazing website to find shared accommodation is flatmates.com.au. You can also check Facebook groups for this. And another low-cost option is to move to areas that are further from the city, perhaps in outer suburbs. Usually rent in these areas tends to be a bit cheaper. Or if you're someone like me who doesn't mind living in apartments, renting a unit or apartment will always be generally cheaper than renting a house. So it's up to you, but remember that the larger the house, the more money potentially you'll be spending on rent, but also maintenance, maintaining the house. So you have to consider these costs according to your circumstances. Now let's talk about the cost of utilities. Something that you should know is that here in Australia, we usually pay bills on a quarterly basis. But for simplicity purposes, here I'll give you the costs per month. Now, according to the latest reports, the average monthly water bill in Australia can go from 69 Australian dollars to 107 Australian dollars per month. And again, these numbers will vary according to your household size and habits in usage. In my case, we're a two-person household and our monthly water bill is around 75 Australian dollars per month. But again, we live in an apartment in an outer suburb, so our rent and overall maintenance costs are way lower. So try to be strategic about that and again, consider your circumstances and your own needs. Now, in terms of electricity costs, according to the latest data, the average Australian household spends around 125 Australian dollars on power bills per month. However, other reports found that for families with children, this number can actually go up to $190 or even more per month. Now, in my case, again, we're a two-person household living in an apartment, and we spend between 124 and 271 Australian dollars per quarter, which is around 41 to 90 Australian dollars per month. Now, in terms of gas bills, the latest reports found that the average monthly costs for gas in Australia are between 66 and 150 Australian dollars. But of course, these costs will vary according to household size and even the state you live in. For example, colder states like Tasmania, Victoria, or South Australia may have a larger gas bill than northern states. Now, in terms of internet costs, like Wi-Fi, the average Australian household spends around 75 Australian dollars per month, which is consistent with what I currently pay, which is around 79 Australian dollars per month. And this is a fixed rate, meaning that it's not impacted by your usage or by the amount of people living in your household. Now, something that I recommend doing if you want to save on your internet bills is to use your mobile data and hotspot it. This way you don't have to pay for Wi-Fi. Having said that, if you work from home and you want a reliable internet connection, paying for Wi-Fi, of course, is necessary. But otherwise, if you're out of home all the time, you work in an office or somewhere else, sometimes the most affordable option is to just use internet from your phone. This way you don't have to pay for Wi-Fi bills. Now, in terms of mobile phone costs, according to the latest reports by Cancer Blue, the average monthly phone bill in Australia is 78 Australian dollars. But this is generally for mobile phone plans, when you're paying for both the phone and the service. However, if you're on a SIM-only plan, you already own the phone and you just need the service. And reports show that the average phone bill for this is around 42 Australian dollars. But these costs may vary according to your telco provider and the amount of data you use. In my case, I pay around 30 Australian dollars per month. And as I always say, I highly recommend doing your research in terms of mobile phone providers so you're able to find competitive prices. Now, let's talk about transportation. According to the latest reports, the average weekly cost of using public transport in Australia can go from 39 to 46 Australian dollars per week, which is around 169 and 200 Australian dollars monthly. But public transport fares will vary from state to state. So again, that's something that you need to consider. Now, in terms of car costs, you can expect to pay between $1.60 and $2 per litre. And Australians spend on average around 286 Australian dollars per month on fuel, which is around 60 to 66 Australian dollars per week. But these costs do not include toll roads, registration, parking, and car insurance, only fuel. And again, these prices will vary significantly depending on the car that you have and even the city or region you're in. And let's talk about healthcare. The cost of GP consultations in Australia varies according to how long your consultation is and whether your GP offers bulk billing or Medicare rebates. So for example, in my case, a standard 20-minute consultation with my GP costs between 109 and 130 Australian dollars. And I get a Medicare rebate of around 43 Australian dollars. For shorter consultations, you may pay less. And for longer ones, you'll pay more. But according to the most recent reports, most GP consultations in Australia start at 80 Australian dollars, but you get the Medicare rebate. Or if you don't have Medicare, you may be covered by private health insurance, which is usually a condition to get an Australian visa. Now, if you want to get a private health insurance, you can expect to pay on average around 160 Australian dollars per month. And if you're a couple or family, you'll naturally pay a bit more. But make sure you do your own research when it comes to health insurance providers, because sometimes they do have some deals or perhaps they offer different premiums according to your own needs and circumstances. Also, if you have private health insurance, you may pay a bit more for extras. Extras sometimes are worth it because, for example, you may have a 100% cover for dental consultations, which can be pretty hefty. Now we're going to talk about that. Or for specific needs that you may have, for example, going to the physio or wearing prescription glasses glasses, etc. So again, do your research. Now, speaking of the dentist, I currently pay around 300 Australian dollars and sometimes even more for a basic checkup and a clean. Yeah, it's super expensive. And if you need specific dental procedures like a root canal or fillings, you can expect to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for that. Again, dentist costs in Australia are very, very hefty. And this is confirmed by the latest data, which estimates that the average cost for a standard dental consultation in Australia is around 230 Australian dollars. But again, dental costs will vary from dentist to dentist. Now, let's talk about education. Your education costs will vary according to your location, your education provider, and your level of study. Something that you may want to know is that education inflation has become one of the major contributors to the rising cost of living across Australia, with an average national increase of 5.85%. Now, if you have children and you want to send them to school, something that you should know is that primary and secondary school fees in Australia are influenced not only by the state you live in, but also by factors such as whether the school is located in a metropolitan or regional area, or whether the school is a state government, Catholic, or independent private school. Now, according to the latest reports, sending your child to a government primary school, for example, in the state of South Australia, will cost you around 440 Australian dollars in school fees per year, and between 20k and 40k per year if you send them to an independent private school. To this, you also need to consider extra costs, such as uniforms, electronic devices, for example, an iPad or a computer, transport, and general school activities, which can amount to over 7k per year. Now, if you want the bigger picture, a report by Future Investment Group notes that over the period of 13 years of schooling, the average cost of education in Australia, including tuition fees and ancillary costs, can go from 80k to 300k depending on the type of school and area, with government public schools or those located in regional areas being generally more affordable than Catholic or independent schools, or those located in major cities. Now, if you want to know more about the school system in Australia, I have a full video about that. Leave you a link down below. Now, let's talk about childcare fees. According to the latest reports, average childcare fees in Australia go between 70 and 300 Australian dollars per day. But again, this will depend on the state or area you live in. Regardless of this, it's insane how expensive it is. And this is one of the reasons as well why the Australian government is looking to implement subsidies and policies that make childcare more affordable for Australian families. Now, for those of you who are interested in taking a TAFE or VET course, for example, a Certificate 4 or a diploma, tuition fees generally start at 7k per semester, and they can go up to 40k per year or more, depending on the discipline. But again, these costs will vary and will be different according to the state you live in, according to the institution that you're enrolling in, but also whether you're an international student or a local student. International students tend to pay significantly more. Now, when it comes to university degrees, tuition fees here in Australia start at 20k per year as a bare minimum, but generally they tend to be a bit higher than this, especially again for international students. And if you're an international student and you need financial assistance to support your studies, I have a full video on how to get a scholarship here in Australia, so I'll leave you the link down below. Now, an amazing resource that you can use to calculate your tuition fees and also to explore different study options, institutes, and courses is this Australian government website called Study Australia. I'll leave you the link down below for you to check out. Now, let's talk about entertainment and recreation costs. When it comes to going to the gym or having a hobby, according to the latest reports, Australians are spending on average between 63 and 70 Australian dollars per month on gym memberships, which personally speaking, these numbers seem a bit low, but these are the averages according to the latest data. In my case, I go to a rock climbing gym and I pay around 127 Australian dollars per month for my membership. Now, if you want to look after your physical health and do exercise, but you can't afford a gym membership, some low-cost options and alternatives that you have may include going for a run, hiking, cycling. Australia has amazing parks and lots of nature around, so running or cycling are amazing activities to do. You can also go swimming for a very low fee. For example, most local councils have their public swimming pools, and you can expect to pay around 10 Australian dollars for a day pass, which is pretty good. And if you want to take your kid, for example, to swimming lessons, which is one of the most common extracurricular activities for children here, you can expect to pay around 40 to 50 Australian dollars per fortnight. So again, it all depends on the kind of activity you're interested in doing, and there are always low-cost options for you to explore. Now, in terms of entertainment, if you want to go to the movies, for example, movie tickets are currently at around 23 Australian dollars. And if you become a member of that cinema, which is what I usually do, you may get some perks and discounts. So make use of that. Now, when it comes to eating out, A cheap meal, for example, for lunch at a food court, may cost you between 12 and 25 Australian dollars, and dinner at a nice restaurant around 50 Australian dollars per person. And for high-end restaurants, meals typically cost about 100 Australian dollars. Now, other extra costs that you may want to consider include, for example, going to the hairdresser. If you go to a fancy hair salon, haircuts usually start at 100 Australian dollars, and the more experienced your stylist is, or the longer the hair, the more expensive the service will be. So I usually pay around 150 Australian dollars for a haircut, which in my opinion is a lot, but it's the way it is. And if you have short hair or you go to the barber shop, prices currently start at 50 Australian dollars. But again, this will depend on the hairdresser and the location. Now, in terms of buying clothing and homeware, prices will vary again according to where you shop. You may pay 100 Australian dollars for a pair of jeans from a well-known brand, but if you go to Kmart or an op shop, which is a second-hand store, you may pay 20 or 30 Australian dollars. And the same goes for furniture and appliances. Popular stores for this kind of items include Harvey Norman, IKEA, Big W, Kmart, JB Hi-Fi, etc. And for everything that's home maintenance or construction, Bunnings is one of the most popular stores as well. Now, if you want to watch more videos on what it's like to live here in Australia, I highly recommend watching this and this. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to keep supporting the channel so I can keep bringing more content for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.